The Los Angeles City Council is finally ending their city's eviction moratorium in February of 2023. But many small mom and pop landlords say that it will take years to recover from the economic loss. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have some sort of good news for small mom and pop landlords, well, all landlords within the city of Los Angeles. The city council finally decided to end the city's eviction moratorium in February of 2023. Now, that isn't the case for all of the units there. I actually read that for rent-controlled units, they won't be allowed to increase rents until 2024. Okay, so they're having an even bigger issue going on that's kind of a separate issue, but just as bad. Okay, the main point though is that small mom and pop landlords in particular are getting their butts handed to them by these far left leaning progressives who don't give a darn about property rights and are basically trying to, cancel rent permanently. Make it so that renters never have to pay rent and landlords have to basically pay for these people to live for free forever. And I'll be surprised. You know what? I will be shocked and surprised if come February, if they really do let this thing end. I really don't think they will. I think this is just a bunch of garbage at this point. They'll be like, oh, well, people are still suffering economically. Well, no crap, okay? People are going to be suffering economically all throughout history. There's going to be somebody who, loses their job or faces some kind of economic crisis. That is not the fault of the landlords. And what you really start to understand is that, hey, these cities, what they want to do is they want to turn housing into this socialized, thing. And if people lose their property rights, that is a direct fall into socialism. And how long is it going to be before the government is taking over not just the rental property business, but all businesses, starting regulating prices on food or fuel or whatever they think that is too expensive, and it's going to just create chaos within our whole entire system. It could crash the system. We are going through this unprecedented economic time right now with crazy inflation, and it could only get worse. The more that the government interferes, it seems like the worse things become. Sometimes I just wish that they would allow us just to operate on our own without their intervention and see where see what happens. But we'll never get to see that. And especially not in a place like California. This is, the place where they believe that big government is good, it's going to make things better. Well, look at the housing costs, look at the rental costs, and tell me that things are better. I don't think that's the case. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Do you believe that the city of Los Angeles is actually going to allow their eviction moratorium to expire in February of 2023? Or do you think this is just a bunch of garbage and that they're just putting on a show and they put some date, kind of far out actually? That's like still a good 4 months away. We got to go through the rest of October, November, December, and January before we finally get to February. And that's plenty of time for them to change their minds. And I don't know, is there an election coming up? Could some of them be, possibly facing election and, lose their jobs? Well, they're going to do what they think will get them the most votes, not what is actually the best for their constituents and for the city itself, but what's going to get them the most votes so that they can keep their jobs. So anyway, let me get into this article. So this article is coming from CBSNews.com, and it says, many mom and pop landlords owed tens of thousands in back rent. Yeah, tens of thousands. And, I've heard some people who've gone into the part where they are owed more than 100,000 at this point. So that's insane. So this article actually has a video with it, and I'll be playing that for you right now.
I moved in to this area in '83.
And 15 years later, Linda Sam decided to become a landlord, purchasing this triplex in the Crenshaw district. She lives in one unit and rents out the other two. It was a way for her to retire until the pandemic hit and one tenant stopped paying rent.
I don't know why people think that we have so much money because we have this building. I scraped to get this building.
Sam says she received back rent from the state's Housing is Key program, but that only paid her through March. Since then, she says she is out more than $10,000 in rental income while still having to pay her mortgage.
It means having difficulty repairing things. It means not being able to eat decently. It means that now I have to go to the churches to get food.
All right, you saw the video. Let's get into the article. Lining the sidewalk off of Exposition Boulevard is a row of triplexes, most of which are owned by mom and pop landlords. I moved into the area in '83, said Linda Sam. 15 years later, Sam decided to become a landlord, purchasing one of the triplexes lining the boulevard in South Los Angeles. She lives in one unit and rents out the other two. It was a way for her to retire until the pandemic hit and one tenant stopped paying rent. We are the last one on the totem pole to be considered, said Sam. I don't know why people think we have so much money. I scraped to get this building. And this is a perfect example of a small mom and pop landlord, okay? So she's doing what we call house hacking. Basically, she bought a triplex and then she lives in one of the units and rents the other two. But if those tenants aren't paying her, guess what? She could really be struggling. A lot of people, especially in more expensive places like Los Angeles, they'll buy a multi-unit like she did, right? And they aren't actually capable of paying the entire rent by themselves, because the property's so expensive there. But with the tenant's additional income, they are able to actually pay that mortgage, okay, and pay all the bills and the maintenance and everything. So this person not only has a house to live in, but they're able to provide housing to someone else and, hopefully build up some equity and maybe make a little bit of extra cash on top of that. I know this is a good thing because I did it myself, okay? When I lived in Tucson, Arizona, I bought a fourplex and I lived in one of the units and rented out the other three. And I basically had no my tenants paid the entire mortgage, the taxes, the insurance, and it was a very cheap way for me to live, and it was a great way for me to get started in real estate investing. So yeah, I am a big supporter of this sort of thing. But when you put an eviction moratorium out there and you tell the tenants, hey, we don't have to pay rent, and there's nothing that you can do about it for going on 3 years now, well, that is horrible for people like this lady who owns just one property. But anyway, let's continue. Sam says she received back rent from the state's Housing is Key program, but that only paid her through March. Since then, she is out more than $10,000 in rental income while still having to pay her mortgage. It means having difficulty repairing things, said Sam. It means not being able to eat decently. It means that now I have to go to the church to get food. Earlier this week, the LA City Council voted to end the eviction moratorium at the end of January, but tenants will have until at least August to start paying back. Yeah, and when you read about this lady's story, right, this is a prime example that not all landlords are wealthy. Okay, they're like, oh, but you own this triplex, and let's say this triplex is, even if it's worth $1 million. Okay, so she owns this triplex worth $1 million, right? But that's not $1 million in the bank. That's just $1 million in equity in a property, and unless she takes that money out, then she doesn't have that money. Okay, and if she put a 30-year mortgage on it, she could definitely still be paying for it right now. Okay, they said that she moved to the area in '83 and then bought the property 15 years later, right? That was 1998. So 30-year mortgage on a property you bought in 1998, guess what? It's not paid for yet, okay? So it sucks, but this lady is still making mortgage payments, right? She doesn't have access to all that cash or all the value for the real estate. And when she doesn't get paid her rent, she's taking money out of her own pocket that she would be using to pay for food or for repairs to the building itself, and she can't do that. So she is, just in a horrible financial situation right here. Rent increases in rent-controlled buildings like Sam's won't be allowed until 2024. Wow, and that's something I mentioned at the very beginning, right? basically you can't increase the rent on these rent controlled buildings until 2024. So she not only lost tens of thousands of dollars to this eviction moratorium, but she can't increase her rents to make up for that lost income. She can't. Not until 2024. She's just out of luck because the tenants, they have to deal with inflation, but the landlord, they magically must be super rich and, inflation doesn't touch them, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. Okay? They're not using common sense, and honestly, I am glad that I don't live in a place like this because I couldn't house hack here. I couldn't, because knowing that, my units were under rent control, knowing that I had to jump through all these hoops and all these eviction protections and all this nonsense, and that I couldn't get rid of these tenants if I wanted to, it's like you don't even really own the property. And that's wrong, okay? We have our property rights. They're written out, they're spelled out in the Constitution, and yet states like California, cities like Los Angeles are completely ignoring them because they, want to turn us into this socialist country. And I'm just not having it. I don't feel it. I don't want it. We don't want it. The majority of people in this country do not want it, and they don't get the point. Okay, if they want to go off and live in a socialist utopia, well, there's Venezuela, there's Cuba, there's North Korea. You tell me which one you think would be a better place than here in the U.S. And stop trying to model our system off of them. That's stupid.